The chandeliers dripped with gold and crystal above my head, each glittering strand a reminder that I didn't belong here. The Royal Pack Gala, where alphas prowled and omegas like me were supposed to fade into the silk-papered walls. I clutched the stem of my champagne flute like it might anchor me to the marble floor, keep me from dissolving into the sea of designer gowns and territorial glances. Every breath I took felt measured, calculated. The air itself was heavy with dominance, layers upon layers of alpha pheromones that made my omega instincts want to submit, to shrink, to disappear. Pine and musk and power thick enough to choke on. But underneath it all, threading through the crowd like smoke, was a scent that made my pulse stutter. Dark chocolate and rain. Wild and clean and dangerous. 6 months since Tyler rejected me. 6 months since he'd stood in front of our entire pack and declared me unworthy of the bond. His voice dripping with disgust as he severed our courtship in the cruelest way possible. I'd spent weeks unable to shift, my wolf whimpering in the back of my mind, convinced we were broken, defective, too weak to be anyone's mate. That's when I saw him. Tyler stood near the throne dais, his hand possessively curved around Hannah's waist. She was everything the pack valued. Tall, confident, draped in emerald silk that probably cost more than I made in 3 months at the apothecary. Her scent was strong, assertive, the kind that announced high-ranking omega before she even opened her mouth. Tyler's fingers flexed against her hip the same way they used to press against mine, back when he'd pretended I was enough. My throat constricted as the memories crashed over me. The humiliation. The whispers that followed me through pack gatherings. The way his mother had smiled when he'd called my scent barely detectable, in front of the elders. I'd clawed my way back to something resembling confidence, and now here he was, in the one place I'd hoped to prove I wasn't shattered. You look like your prey deciding whether to run or fight. The voice cut through the chaos in my head, deep, resonant, with a rough edge that vibrated down my spine like a physical touch. I turned, blinking back the tears I refused to let fall. The man behind me wasn't what I expected at this polished royal affair. His presence didn't just command space. It devoured it. Wolves near us shifted unconsciously, creating a radius of empty floor without seeming to realize they'd moved. Not because of his size, though he towered over me like a mountain carved from shadow and muscle, but because of something more primal. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge, ancient and absolute. "Neither," I managed, my voice steadier than the tremor in my hands. Just realizing I should have stayed home. His eyes, molten amber ringed in darkness, followed my gaze to Tyler. Something predatory flickered across his features, there and gone like lightning before thunder. He wore all black, formal but somehow untamed. No ceremonial pack regalia. No badges of rank. Just expensive fabric that moved with him like a second skin. The scent of dark chocolate and rain intensified, wrapping around me until I couldn't breathe anything else. Leather and night air and something wild that made my wolf raise her head for the first time in months. "Your ex?" he asked, though it didn't sound like a question. Sounded like a verdict. I nodded, suddenly aware of how pathetic I must look. A rejected omega lurking at the edges, nursing cheap champagne, staring daggers at the man who destroyed her. The man who'd made her believe she was less than nothing. "Dance with me." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, desperate and raw. "My ex is watching." And I stopped, heat flooding my cheeks. "Sorry. That was inappropriate. I don't even know your name." A scarred hand, broad and calloused, appeared in my peripheral vision. Slowly, deliberately. He reached past me to pluck the champagne from my grip and set it on a passing servant's tray. "You don't need to know my name, little omega," he murmured, his voice dropping to a register that made every nerve ending in my body spark to life. "You just need to stop looking back at what didn't deserve you." Then his hand slid around my waist, possessive, claiming, burning through the thin fabric of my gown, and he pulled me onto the dance floor before I could even see his face clearly. Before I could realize I just asked the Ruthless Alpha King himself to help me make my ex jealous. Before I could know that he'd been hunting my scent for months. and that he had absolutely no intention of ever letting me go. His hand on my waist felt like a brand, hot enough to sear through the delicate silver fabric of my gown. I'd expected him to lead me to the dance floor's edge, somewhere dim and forgettable where I could play at confidence for Tyler's benefit. Instead, he walked us straight through the center of the ballroom, parting the sea of wolves like Moses with significantly less divine intervention and significantly more barely leashed violence. Every eye in the room tracked our movement. I felt the weight of their stares like physical touches, curious, scandalized, hungry. The orchestra had been playing something soft and forgettable, but the moment his hand settled more firmly against the small of my back, the conductor seemed to sense a shift in the air. The music swelled into something darker, a waltz that felt more like a claiming than a dance. "You're trembling," he observed, his voice a low rumble against my ear as he pulled me into position. Not close enough to be improper by pack standards, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body, smell that intoxicating scent of dark chocolate and rain that made my wolf pace restlessly. "I don't usually ask strangers to use me as a prop," I admitted, trying for levity and landing somewhere near mortification. "This is new territory." His mouth curved slightly, though I wouldn't call it a smile. More like the expression a predator makes before it strikes. "Use me." He repeated the words like he was tasting them, finding them wanting. "Little Omega, I don't think you understand what you've just done." Before I could ask what he meant, he moved. One hand remained anchored at my waist while the other captured mine. His palm rough with calluses that spoke of weapons training, not paperwork. He led me into the first step of the waltz, and I realized with startling clarity that this wasn't just a dance. This was a statement. He moved like violence wrapped in silk, each step precise and controlled, guiding me through the pattern with an authority that made my omega instincts simultaneously want to submit and rebel. When he turned me, his hand slid from my waist to my hip, lower than propriety allowed. Fingers splayed possessively across the curve. The touch sent electricity racing up my spine. "Eyes on me." It wasn't a request. His amber eyes pinned me in place, making the rest of the ballroom blur into irrelevance. Not him. Me. I hadn't even realized my gaze had drifted toward Tyler. Heat flooded my cheeks. "Sorry, don't apologize." He pulled me closer, eliminating the respectable distance between us. Now we were properly scandalous, my chest nearly flush against his thigh sliding between mine with each step. "You asked me to make him watch. So let's give him something worth watching." The scent of dark chocolate and rain intensified, wrapping around me until I was drowning in it. My wolf, dormant and wounded for months, suddenly surged to the surface with a desperate, keening sound I felt in my bones. Mate. Mate. The word pulsed through my blood like a second heartbeat, insistent and terrifying. Mo. That was impossible. I would have known. I would have felt it before now. But the bond doesn't lie, and my wolf was practically clawing at my ribcage, demanding I acknowledge what my rational mind refused to accept. This stranger, this dark, dangerous man who moved like death in expensive clothing, couldn't possibly be my fated mate. "What's your name?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Something flickered in his eyes. Not quite amusement, not quite warning. "Does it matter? I should probably know whose personal space I'm invading." "You're not invading anything, little Omega." His hand flexed against my hip, thumb tracing small circles that made my breath catch. "I'm claiming it. There's a difference." The music swelled, and he spun me out, then back in with enough force that I collided with his chest. His arm locked around my waist like an iron bar, holding me against him while the world continued its rotation around us. I could feel his heartbeat against my palm where it rested on his shoulder, steady, unhurried, while mine jackhammered like I'd run a marathon. "You smell like vanilla and something sweeter," he murmured, his nose grazing my temple in a gesture that looked tender but felt like a wolf scenting prey. "Honeysuckle, maybe." It's been driving me insane. What? My brain couldn't process the words. Strangers didn't say things like that. Not to me. Not to the Omega whose own boyfriend had called her scent barely detectable. For months, he continued, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated through my chest. I've been tracking it, following it through the pack territories like a madman, trying to find the source. And then you show up here in my domain, wearing a gown that looks like moonlight and asking me to dance. Dread pooled in my stomach, cold and heavy. Your domain. His smile this time was all teeth. You really don't know who I am, do you? Before I could answer, before I could demand he stop speaking in riddles, a familiar voice cut through the music like a knife through silk. Mia. Taylor. Course. I'd been so focused on the man holding me that I'd forgotten the entire point of this exercise was to make my ex jealous. Judging by the barely controlled fury in his voice, the plan had worked spectacularly well. The stranger. No, I couldn't keep thinking of him as a stranger when my wolf was screaming mate with increasing desperation. Stilled. His body didn't tense exactly, but something shifted in the air around us. Temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. When he turned his head to look at Tyler, the movement was slow, deliberate, predatory. You're interrupting, he said simply. Tyler's face flushed red. Even from here, I could see Hannah's restraining hand on his arm, could smell the sharp edge of her fear cutting through her perfume. But Tyler had never been good at reading rooms or recognizing when he was catastrophically outmatched. I need to speak with Mia, Tyler insisted. His alpha authority bleeding into his voice, trying to command me the way he'd done when we were together. Alone. The hand on my hip tightened fractionally. No. Just that. One word. But it carried enough weight to make several nearby wolves drop their gazes, submitting to an authority they recognized even if I didn't. This is pack business, Tyler pressed, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. She's mine. The word came out as a growl, low and dangerous, vibrating through my body where we touched. Whatever she was before tonight, whatever pack business you think you have with her, is irrelevant. She asked me to dance. We're dancing. Leave. The music had stopped. I wasn't sure when. The entire ballroom had fallen silent. Hundreds of wolves watching this confrontation with a kind of fascinated horror usually reserved for public executions. Hannah had gone pale, tugging frantically at Tyler's arm now, whispering something urgent in his ear. But Tyler, bless his stupid, prideful heart, had never known when to back down. You can't just claim someone else's. She's not yours. The man's voice dropped to a register that made my knees weak. She never was, based on the scent of rejection all over her. You threw her away like trash, so don't stand here and pretend you have any rights to her now. Tyler's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally, as his brain caught up with what was happening, genuine terror. His eyes went wide. He dropped to one knee so fast I heard his kneecap crack against marble. Your Majesty, he gasped. I didn't realize. Your Majesty. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like bullets in a steel room. Majesty. King. Alpha King. God. I'd asked the Alpha King to dance. The Ruthless Alpha King, Aaron Blackwood, who'd ruled the werewolf territories for a decade with an iron fist and a reputation for swift, merciless justice. The king who hadn't taken a mate, hadn't shown interest in any Omega, who was rumored to be waiting for something. Someone specific. And he'd said mine. My legs gave out. Only his arm around my waist kept me upright. His grip shifting to support my full weight as if I weighed nothing at all. Breathe, little Omega, he murmured against my hair. His voice gentle now, at odds with the violence still thrumming through his frame. You're all right. I have you. But I wasn't all right. The entire ballroom was on their knees now, heads bowed in submission, and I was the only one still standing because the Alpha King himself was holding me up. Tyler's face had gone white, Hannah openly weeping beside him, both of them prostrate on the floor. You rejected her, Aaron said, his voice carrying across the silent room with terrifying clarity. You called her unworthy, told your pack she was defective. It wasn't a question. Somehow he knew. He'd known everything. You have 10 seconds to apologize to my mate before I decide your continued existence is more trouble than it's worth. He'd said it out loud in front of everyone, making it real and binding and utterly inescapable. Tyler's apology came out as a strangled sob, words tripping over themselves in desperate supplication. I barely heard them. My ears were ringing, my wolf howling in triumph and terror, and the Alpha King's hand was still burning against my hip, claiming me in front of the entire werewolf kingdom. "We're leaving," Aaron announced, though I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or the room at large. "No one follows. No one approaches. She's under my protection now, and I've killed wolves for far less than breathing wrong in her direction." He swept me toward the exit, my feet barely touching the ground, while 300 wolves remained frozen in submission behind us. The last thing I saw before we left the ballroom was Tyler's face, twisted in anguish and regret, finally understanding exactly what he'd thrown away. And the terrifying part was, I still didn't fully understand what I'd just claimed for myself. If this story has held you this long, subscribing is how you help it continue. Thank you. Now back to the story. Aaron didn't take me far. Just beyond the ballroom's golden doors, into a corridor lined with portraits of previous Alpha Kings, their painted eyes following our movement with silent judgment. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat, taste copper on my tongue like I'd bitten through my own cheek. "I can't breathe," I gasped, pulling against his grip. Not fighting him exactly, but my body had finally caught up with my brain, flooding me with panic. I need a minute." He released me immediately, though he didn't step back. Instead, he positioned himself between me and the ballroom doors, a wall of solid muscle and dark intent. His amber eyes tracked every flutter of my pulse, every tremor in my hands as I pressed them against the cool marble wall. "You're having a panic attack," he observed, clinical and calm, like he'd seen this 1,000 times before. "Focus on my voice. Breathe in for 4 counts. I sucked in air too fast, too shallow. You just told 300 wolves that I'm your mate. Yes. You threatened to kill Tyler. I would have if his apology had taken longer than 10 seconds. He said it so matter-of-factly, like murder was a minor inconvenience rather than a criminal act. "Breathe, Mia. In for 4. I tried to follow his instruction, pulling air into my constricted lungs. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted with me. His voice that low rumble that somehow cut through the static in my head. "You know my name," I said when I could speak again. "You've known it this whole time. I've known everything about you for 6 months." No apology in his tone, no shame. Just stated fact. "Your full name is Mia Catherine Thorne. You work at the Moonvale Apothecary making salves and tinctures, even though you have a degree in botanical medicine that should have you working somewhere far more prestigious. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment above the bakery on 7th Street. You take your coffee black with 2 sugars. You sketch in the margins of your notebooks when you think no one is watching." Each detail landed like a physical blow. That's stalking." "Yes," he agreed easily. "It is." The casual admission somehow made it worse. I stared at him, this stranger who wasn't a stranger at all, who'd apparently been watching me for months while I'd been completely oblivious. "Why?" "Because the first time I caught your scent, I nearly shifted in the middle of a trade negotiation with the Northern Pax." His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the dark stubble. "Because I've spent a decade as Alpha King without feeling even a flicker of the mating bond. And then you walked past my car one afternoon in March, and I knew. Instantly. Irrevocably. March. That was 6 months ago, right after Tyler's rejection. I'd been a wreck, barely functional, spending my days in a haze of humiliation and grief. And apparently, the Alpha King had been following me through it, all like some kind of supernatural stalker. "You should have approached me," I said, though even I could hear how weak the protest sounded. "You should have said something. You weren't ready." He took a step closer, and I had nowhere to go with my back against the wall. "You were broken, little Omega. shattered by that pathetic excuse for an alpha who couldn't see what was right in front of him. If I'd approached you then, you would have thought I was taking advantage. Or worse, that I pitied you. So you just watched. I protected you. His hand came up to rest on the wall beside my head, caging me in. Every time someone in your pack whispered about how you must be defective, I made note of their names. Every time Tyler's mother spread rumors about your fertility, I documented it. And when the elders started discussing whether to demote you to Pack Omega, the lowest rank, basically a servant, I made it very clear that anyone who touched your status would answer to me personally. I blinked trying to process this. The elders never said anything about demotion. Because I told them not to. His mouth curved into something too sharp to be a smile. Did you really think it was coincidence that your pack suddenly became very careful about how they treated you? That Tyler stopped showing up at your workplace to harass you? That his mother's gossip dried up overnight? Well, I'd hoped, that they'd simply gotten bored with me. Moved on to fresh drama. The idea that the Alpha King had been orchestrating my protection from the shadows made my chest tight with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite gratitude. You had no right, I whispered. I had every right. He leaned in closer, his scent overwhelming, intoxicating. You're mine, Mia. You've been mine since the moment the fates tied our souls together. I was just waiting for you to be strong enough to handle me. Before I could respond, before I could even begin to untangle that statement, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Heavy, hurried, accompanied by the scent of pine and poorly controlled aggression. Aaron's entire demeanor shifted. The man who'd been explaining his months-long stalking campaign with almost tender patience disappeared, replaced by something cold and lethal. He straightened, putting himself fully between me and whoever was approaching, one hand reaching back to keep me behind him. Tyler rounded the corner at a near run, Hannah scrambling to keep up with him, her face streaked with tears and terror. When he saw us, he skidded to a halt, his expression cycling rapidly from determination to fear to something ugly and desperate. Mia, he panted, ignoring Aaron entirely in a display of stupidity so profound it almost impressed me. Mia, please, we need to talk. No. Aaron's voice could have frozen fire. You need to return to the ballroom, collect your mate, and leave my territory before I decide your presence offends me. This is between me and her, Tyler insisted, taking a step forward. She was mine first. We had a connection, a history. You can't just. She asked you to stop. I hadn't even realized I'd spoken until both men's heads swiveled toward me. My voice came out stronger than I expected, steadier. After you rejected me, I asked you to leave me alone. You kept showing up at my work. You kept calling. You kept. I made a mistake. Tyler's hands clenched into fists at his sides. I was stupid, okay? I let my mother convince me that you weren't good enough, that your Omega status was too low, that I needed someone stronger. But I was wrong. I've been miserable with Hannah. Hannah made a small, wounded sound. Tyler didn't even glance at her. You destroyed me, I said quietly. The words felt important, necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering for months. You stood in front of our entire pack and told them I was unworthy. You said my scent was barely detectable, that I was defective, that no alpha would ever want to bond with me. You made me believe I was broken. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. My voice hardened. You meant every word. Because it made you feel powerful to tear me down. It made you feel like a real alpha to have everyone watch you reject the weak Omega who'd been stupid enough to love you. Tyler's face flushed red. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure I was under. My mother, the pack expectations. I don't care. The realization hit me like cold water, clarifying and sharp. I don't care about your excuses anymore, Tyler. I'm done letting you make me feel small. You're being manipulated, Tyler said desperately, his eyes finally flickering to Aaron. He's the Alpha King. He could have anyone. Why would he want you unless? He didn't get to finish the sentence. Aaron moved faster than I'd ever seen a wolf move outside of a shift. One moment he was standing beside me, the next his hand was wrapped around Tyler's throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him back against the opposite wall hard enough to crack the marble. Portraits shook in their frames. Hannah screamed. "Finish that sentence," Aaron invited. His voice pleasant and absolutely terrifying. "Please. Give me an excuse." Tyler's face was turning purple, his hands clawing uselessly at Aaron's wrist. You just what?" Aaron's grip tightened. "You were going to imply that the only reason I'd want your mate, sorry, your ex, since you threw her away, is what? Political leverage. A moment of pity. Please enlighten me." "Aaron." My hand touched his shoulder, tentative. "He's not worth it." Something flickered in Aaron's eyes when I said his name. His grip on Tyler's throat didn't loosen, but his attention shifted to me, amber eyes searching my face. "He insulted you. Insulted us. Implied that my mate isn't worthy of being claimed. He's an idiot who's going to pass out in about 30 seconds if you don't let him breathe." Aaron held Tyler's gaze for a long moment, letting him see death staring back. Then, with obvious reluctance, he released him. Tyler collapsed to the floor, gasping and coughing, one hand clutched to his throat. "You will not speak to her again," Aaron said, his voice dropping to that register that made every wolf instinct scream submit. "You will not approach her. You will not send intermediaries or gifts or messages. You will not think about her. As far as you're concerned, Mia Thorne no longer exists in your world." "She's my pack member," Tyler wheezed. "I'm her alpha." "Not anymore." Aaron's smile was all teeth and violence. "As of tonight, Mia is under my direct protection. She answers to no pack alpha but me. Her ties to Moonvale Pack are severed. If your father, the current alpha, has an issue with this, he can bring it to me personally." The color drained from Tyler's face. Severing pack bonds without formal ceremony was technically illegal, but who was going to argue with the Alpha King? Who would be stupid enough to challenge his authority when he just claimed someone as his mate in front of half the kingdom? "You can't do that," Hannah spoke up, her voice small but defiant. She'd helped Tyler to his feet, was supporting his weight against her smaller frame. "Pack bonds are sacred. She was born into Moonvale. You need the council's approval to." "I need nothing." Aaron's attention swung to her, and she physically recoiled. "I am the council. I am the law in these territories. And I say that Mia is no longer subject to Moonvale Pack's authority. If anyone in that pack, *anyone*, attempts to enforce pack law on her, commands her, or so much as looks at her wrong, they'll answer to me. Personally." The threat hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. Hannah's defiance crumbled. She dropped her gaze, baring her throat in submission, pulling Tyler down with her until they were both kneeling in the corridor. "We understand, Your Majesty," she whispered. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." Aaron's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine with a possessiveness that should have annoyed me but instead felt like an anchor. "Now get out of my sight before my mercy runs out." They fled. Tyler didn't even look back at me, just let Hannah drag him down the corridor and back toward the ballroom, both of them moving with the frantic energy of prey that had just escaped a predator's jaws. The silence they left behind was deafening. "You severed my pack bonds," I said slowly, trying to understand what had just happened. Pack bonds were everything in werewolf society. They were family identity protection. Without them, a wolf was essentially a rogue, vulnerable and alone. "I'm not part of Moonvale anymore. You're part of the royal pack now." He said it like it was simple, like he hadn't just fundamentally altered my entire existence with a few words. "My pack. Under my protection and authority. You didn't ask. Would you have said no?" His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand, the gesture at odds with the violence still thrumming through his frame. "Would you have chosen to stay in a pack that treated you like garbage, led by an alpha who was too weak to protect you from his own family's cruelty?" The answer should have been yes. I should have been furious at his high-handedness. His assumption that he could just reorganize my life without consultation. But the truth lodged in my throat, too honest and raw to deny. No, I admitted quietly. I wouldn't have chosen to stay. Then stop fighting me on the logistics. He pulled me closer, his free hand coming up to cup my face with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about the Ruthless Alpha King. I know this is fast. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I've waited 6 months for you to be ready, Mia. I've watched you piece yourself back together, watched you become stronger. And tonight, when you asked me to dance, you gave me permission to stop waiting. I didn't know it was you, I protested weakly. Your wolf knew. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. The moment I touched you, she knew. I could feel her reaching for mine, calling to the bond even if your human mind was too stubborn to accept it. He was right. My wolf had known. Even now, she was practically purring, content in a way she hadn't been since before Tyler's rejection. The mate bond hummed between us like a live wire, insistent and undeniable. What happens now? Asked. Aaron's smile this time was softer, though no less predatory. Now, little Omega, I take you home. To the Blackwood estate. Where you'll be safe, protected, and very thoroughly convinced that you belong to me. The promise in those words made heat pool low in my belly. And if I say no, then I'll court you properly. Flowers and dates and all the traditional pack bonding rituals. His eyes gleamed. But we both know you won't say no. Because your wolf is screaming yes loud enough that I can practically hear her. And because you're tired of being alone. He wasn't wrong. I was so tired of being alone, of being broken, of feeling like I'd never be enough. Take me home, I whispered. His answering growl vibrated through my bones, possessive and satisfied. With pleasure. And as he swept me toward the exit, his hand burning against my lower back, I realized I'd just traded one claiming for another. The difference was, this time I'd chosen it. Even if I didn't fully understand what I'd chosen yet. The Blackwood estate wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined something cold and imposing, all sharp angles and dark stone befitting the Ruthless Alpha King's reputation. Instead, the car wound through ancient forests where moonlight filtered through canopy leaves, illuminating a sprawling manor that looked like it had grown from the earth itself. Dark wood and river stone, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected starlight, wild gardens that hadn't been tamed so much as guided into deliberate chaos. Beautiful. It was devastatingly beautiful. This is home, Aaron said as he opened my car door, offering his hand. The driver, a stern-faced beta named Marcus who'd maintained absolute silence during the 20-minute drive, had already disappeared into the night. The main house has 47 rooms, but you'll only need to know a few of them. For now, 47 rooms. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment where I could touch opposite walls if I stretched. The scale of difference between our worlds hit me like a physical blow. Hey! Aaron's fingers found my chin, tilting my face up until I met his eyes. Whatever you're thinking, stop. You belong here. With me. I don't even own nice furniture, I blurted out, then immediately wanted to sink into the gravel driveway. Sorry. I'm just processing. His mouth curved into something almost fond. You can burn every stick of furniture in this house if it makes you comfortable. I don't care about things, Mia. I care about you. He led me through the front entrance, past rooms that blurred together in a haze of expensive rugs and artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Staff members appeared and disappeared like ghosts, bowing their heads in deference as we passed. None of them seemed surprised to see their Alpha King bringing home a strange Omega in a ball gown at midnight. Either this was normal behavior, or Aaron had warned them in advance. Given what I'd learned about his obsessive tendencies, probably the latter. The West Wing is mine, he explained as we climbed a grand staircase with wrought iron railings. The East Wing houses essential staff. The North Wing is mostly storage and guest rooms. And the South Wing. He paused at the top of the stairs, something unreadable flickering across his face. The south wing is yours. If you want it. Mine. I had it prepared. He said it casually, like preparing an entire wing of a house for someone was perfectly normal. After I confirmed you were my mate, I wanted you to have space that was completely yours, where you'd feel safe even if, especially if, you weren't ready to share my rooms yet. The thoughtfulness of it made my chest tight. Tyler had never even cleared a drawer for me in his apartment during our entire relationship. And here was the Alpha King, giving me an entire wing of his house without me asking. Can I see it? Yes. Something heated flickered in his eyes. Later. There's something else I need to show you first. He guided me down a different corridor, this one narrower and more intimate than the grand hallways below. The walls here were darker, the lighting softer, and I caught his scent everywhere, that intoxicating mixture of dark chocolate and rain that made my wolf preen with satisfaction. We stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. Aaron's hand rested on the handle, but he didn't open it immediately. Instead he turned to face me, his expression almost vulnerable. If a man who'd threatened murder multiple times tonight could be called vulnerable. Before I show you this, I need you to understand something. His voice was careful, controlled. What's behind this door is going to scare you. Should scare you. It scares me sometimes, how much of myself I've given to this obsession with you. My mouth went dry. What is it? Proof. He opened the door. That I didn't just notice you tonight. That this isn't some spontaneous claiming based on a dance. That you've been living in my head, under my skin, for 6 months. The room beyond was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 feet square, with the same floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to be a theme throughout the house. But it wasn't the architecture that made my breath catch. It was the contents. One entire wall was covered in photographs. Not creepy surveillance shots, but candid images that looked like they'd been taken from a distance. Me leaving the apothecary with a bag of herbs. Me sitting on my apartment steps sketching in my notebook. Me at the farmer's market, laughing at something the flower vendor had said. Me walking through the park, feeding ducks by the pond. Hundreds of photos. Months of my life. Documented without my knowledge. Aaron, I whispered, torn between fear and something I couldn't name. Keep looking, he said quietly. The opposite wall held sketches. My sketches. Or rather, reproductions of them, blown up and framed like precious artwork. The botanical drawings I did in the margins of my notebooks. The fantasy landscapes I doodled when my mind wandered. The portrait of my mother I'd drawn from memory after she died. The one I thought I'd thrown away. The waste bin outside your apartment, Aaron said, answering my unspoken question. You crumpled it up and tossed it. I retrieved it, had it restored and framed. In the center of the room sat a table covered in objects. My favorite coffee mug. The chipped one with the botanical print that I'd thought I'd lost. A hair ribbon I'd worn to the spring festival. A pen I'd dropped in the street. A napkin where I'd written a recipe, left behind at a cafe. Even a pressed flower from the bouquet I'd bought myself after a particularly hard day. You've been stealing from me, I said, my voice oddly calm despite the way my hands were shaking. Yes. No excuse, no justification. Just brutal honesty. Every piece of you I could collect without making you aware of my presence. Every remnant you left behind. I kept them all. There was a bookshelf against the third wall, and when I moved closer, I saw it was filled with journals. Leather-bound, expensive, each one dated. I pulled one at random, April 2025, and opened it. Aaron's handwriting filled the pages. Not random observations, but detailed accounts written like diary entries. Asterisk April 7th. She wore yellow today. It made her look like sunshine, which is ironic because she spent the entire morning in the apothecary's dark backroom mixing depression remedies. I wanted to burn down everyone who made her feel like she needed to be the one providing comfort when she's barely holding herself together. Marcus had to physically stop me from going inside. Asterisk April 15th. She cried on her apartment steps today after Tyler showed up at her work again. I watched her from the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard I bent the metal. She doesn't understand that every tear she sheds is another reason I'll make him suffer when I finally stop restraining myself. April 23rd. She smiled at a child today. A real smile, not the broken half version she's been wearing since the rejection. I hadn't realized how much I needed to see her happy until that moment. I took 17 photos. Marcus thinks I'm losing my mind. He's probably right. I flipped through page after page, months of obsessive documentation. Not just what I did but how I made him feel. His frustration at not being able to approach me. His rage at everyone who'd hurt me. His desperate, growing need to claim me, to protect me, to possess me completely. This is insane, I breathed, though I couldn't stop reading. Yes, Aaron agreed. He hadn't moved from the doorway, was giving me space to process. It is. May 30th. She drew a wolf today in her notebook. I saw it when she left it on the counter at the apothecary. It looked like me in shifted form, though she can't possibly know that. The idea that I exist in her subconscious, even unknowingly, makes me want to howl at the moon like a lovesick adolescent. I'm the Alpha King. I've negotiated peace treaties and executed traitors without flinching. And this small omega is reducing me to poetry and surveillance. You wrote poetry. I turned to face him, holding up the journal where I'd found a page of terrible, earnest verse about my eyes. His jaw tightened. Bad poetry. I burned most of it. This is. I gestured helplessly at the room. This is so far beyond normal, Aaron. This is the kind of thing that should send me running. I know. He finally stepped into the room, moving slowly like I was a wild animal he might spook. That's why I waited. That's why I didn't approach you immediately. Because I knew if you saw the depth of this obsession before you understood the mate bond, before you felt even a fraction of what I feel, you'd be terrified. I am terrified, I admitted. But you're still here. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could feel the heat of him but not touching. You haven't run. You haven't demanded Marcus drive you back to your apartment. Why? I didn't have a good answer. Or rather, I had an answer I wasn't ready to speak out loud. Because my wolf recognized this for what it was. Not a threat, but a promise. Because part of me, the broken part that Tyler had shattered, desperately needed to know that someone could want me this much. That I was worth this level of obsession. Show me more, I said instead. Aaron's eyes flashed amber. His wolf close to the surface. He moved to a cabinet I hadn't noticed, built into the wall beside the window. When he opened it, I saw boxes. Dozens of them, each one labeled with dates. He pulled one at random, March 2025, and brought it to the table, carefully moving aside the other objects to make room. Inside were more stolen pieces of my life. Receipts from purchases I'd made. Napkins with my coffee order written in my handwriting. A broken bracelet I'd tossed in a public trash can. Even strands of my hair, carefully preserved in small glass vials. That one's especially creepy, I said, picking up a vial. You left it on the back of a chair at the library. He said it like it was perfectly reasonable. I couldn't just leave it there. I should have been calling for help. I should have been documenting this for a restraining order. Instead, I found myself opening another box, then another, piecing together the story of his obsession through stolen artifacts and handwritten confessions. You were there the day Tyler rejected me, I said, finding the journal entry. You wrote that you almost shifted and killed him in front of the entire pack. Marcus tackled me before I could. Aaron's voice had gone rough, dangerous. Held me down while I fought to get to you. It took 4 betas to keep me restrained until I could control myself. I still have scars from where they had to use silver restraints. He pulled up his sleeve, showing me the faint marks on his wrists. Evidence of the day he'd been driven so feral by my pain that his own people had to chain him. Why? I whispered. Why did you feel it so strongly when we'd never even met? The mate bond doesn't wait for introduction, Mia. He moved closer, drawn by some invisible string between us. The moment you came into your full adult scent, which happened to be the same day as your rejection because trauma triggers omega maturity, the bond snapped into place. I felt your pain like it was my own. I felt your humiliation, your heartbreak, your self-loathing. And I wanted to burn down the world that had hurt you. So you followed me instead. I protected you, he corrected. There's a difference. Every threat that disappeared from your life, every convenient solution that fell into your lap, I was behind it. The apothecary was going to fire you because Tyler's mother pressured them. I bought the building and made it clear you were untouchable. Your landlord tried to evict you to make room for Hannah's cousin. I purchased that property too. Your car broke down and you couldn't afford repairs. An anonymous donor covered it. I stared at him, realization after realization clicking into place. The scholarship for the Advanced Botanical Certification course. Me. The pack members who suddenly stopped harassing me. I had conversations with each of them. My rent getting reduced. I subsidize it personally. Oh my God. I sank into the chair by the table, my legs giving out. You've been controlling my entire life. I've been ensuring you had one, he corrected, kneeling in front of me so we were eye level. You were drowning, Mia. Tyler and his family were systematically destroying you, and your pack alpha, Tyler's father, was letting it happen because it was easier than confronting his own son. You needed someone in your corner, even if you didn't know I was there. You should have told me. When? His hands found mine. His touch careful despite the intensity in his eyes. When you were sobbing yourself to sleep every night. When you were barely eating because grief had stolen your appetite. When you flinched every time an alpha looked at you because Tyler had conditioned you to expect cruelty. Tell me when, Mia. When would have been the right time to approach you and say, "Hello, I'm the Alpha King, you're my fated mate, and I've been obsessively tracking your every movement since the worst day of your life?" Put like that, it almost made sense. Almost. You could have just been normal, I said weakly. Asked me on a date. Courted me properly. I'm not normal. His grip on my hands tightened. I'm the Alpha King. I've spent a decade alone because I refused to settle for anyone less than my fated mate. And when I finally found you, you were in pieces. And the only thing I could do was put you back together from the shadows and pray that when you were whole again, you'd give me a chance. This is crazy, I whispered. Yes. He brought my hands to his lips, pressing kisses to my knuckles. But it's also fate. You can hate how it happened. You can be angry that I didn't give you a choice in my protection. But you can't deny that you feel this. He pressed my palm against his chest, where his heart hammered against his ribs. You feel the bond. You feel your wolf calling to mine. And you feel safe with me, even knowing everything you know now. He was right. I hated that he was right. Despite the room full of evidence that Aaron Blackwood was dangerously obsessed with me, despite the stalking and the stealing and the 6 months of secret surveillance, I felt safer in this moment than I had in a year. I need time, I said finally, to process this, to understand what I'm agreeing to. Take all the time you need. He stood, pulling me up with him. Your wing is ready. Private entrance, private kitchen, anything you need. I won't enter without permission. You set the pace, Mia. I've waited 6 months. I can wait longer. But as he led me out of the obsession room, as we walked down corridors toward the south wing, I wasn't sure I wanted him to wait. Because my wolf was singing, the mate bond was pulling tight between us, and for the first time since Tyler's rejection, I felt like I might actually be worth the obsession of a king. Even if that king was completely, utterly insane. I'd been living in the south wing for 3 days when Aaron burst through my private entrance without knocking. His face a mask of barely controlled rage. Get dressed, he said, his voice tight. Something formal. We're going to the High Council chambers. I looked up from the botanical text I'd been reading, curled in the window seat with morning sunlight warming my shoulders. What happened? Tyler happened. Aaron's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Tyler and his poisonous excuse for a mate. They've petitioned the High Council to contest our bond. The book slipped from my fingers. They can't do that. They can try. His eyes flashed amber, wolf close to the surface. They're claiming you're infertile. That you're an unsuitable mate for the Alpha King because you can't produce heirs. They've brought medical records, testimony from pack doctors, even Hannah's mother who's apparently some kind of fertility specialist. The words hit like physical blows. Infertile. Unsuitable. The same insults Tyler had used during our relationship, weaponized now to destroy what I'd found with Aaron. I've never been tested, I said quietly. How could they have medical records? They fabricated them. Aaron moved closer, his presence filling the room. Poorly, I might add. But the council is required to hear all challenges to royal bondings. It's ancient law, designed to prevent kings from being manipulated by unsuitable mates. His mouth twisted. Tyler's counting on pack politics and prejudice against low-ranking omegas to work in his favor. I stood, my wolf bristling with outrage. When? 1 hour. His hand found my face, thumb stroking my cheekbone. I need you to trust me, Mia. What I'm about to do in that chamber will change everything. For you, for us, for every wolf in the kingdom. What are you planning? His smile was all teeth and violence. To remind them exactly what a fated mate bond means. And why questioning mine is the last mistake they'll ever make. 45 minutes later, I stood beside Aaron in the High Council chambers, wearing a gown he'd had delivered to my room. Deep midnight blue that made my skin glow and my eyes look enormous. The 7 council members sat in a semicircle on an elevated platform, their faces ranging from curious to openly hostile. Tyler and Hannah stood across from us with their entourage, including Tyler's father, Alpha James of Moonvale Pack, and Hannah's mother, a severe woman in healer's robes. This is highly irregular, Your Majesty, Councillor Blackthorn said, her tone disapproving. She was old guard aristocracy, the kind who believed omegas should be seen and not heard. To bring the contested mate to her own hearing. She's not contested, Aaron interrupted, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. She's mine. The bond is sealed by fate itself. But since you've allowed this farce of a hearing, Mia has every right to face her accusers. The petition has merit, Councillor Ashford interjected. He was younger, ambitious, and I'd heard rumors he supported Tyler's family politically. These medical records suggest severe fertility issues. The Alpha King requires an heir. If this Omega cannot provide one, show me the records, Aaron demanded. A clerk scurried forward with a folder. Aaron flipped through it, his expression growing darker with each page. Then, with deliberate slowness, he tore the entire file in half. Forgeries, he said flatly. Any healer with actual credentials could spot it. The bloodwork dates don't match the examination dates. The physician's signature belongs to a doctor who died 2 years ago. And the hormone levels cited are physiologically impossible for a living Omega. He let the shredded papers fall to the floor. Did you even bother to verify this before granting them a hearing, or were you too eager to humiliate my mate? Councillor Blackthorn's face flushed. We followed protocol. You followed prejudice. Aaron's power filled the room, making several council members shift uncomfortably. You saw a low-ranking Omega and assumed she must be defective. You saw Tyler Thorne, son of an Alpha, and gave him credibility he hasn't earned. Your Majesty, Alpha James stepped forward, trying for diplomacy. My son has legitimate concerns. He and Mia were courting for over a year. He has intimate knowledge of her limitations. Intimate knowledge. Aaron's voice dropped to a register that made my spine tingle. Tell me, Alpha James, what intimate knowledge does your son have of my mate that gives him any authority to speak on her fertility? The trap was elegant. If James confirmed Tyler had intimate knowledge, he'd be admitting they'd been sexually active, which was taboo before formal bonding. If he denied it, Tyler's entire testimony became hearsay. James's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. That's what I thought. Aaron turned to Tyler directly. You rejected her. Publicly. Severed any potential bond in the cruelest way possible. You have no claim to her, no right to speak about her, and certainly no standing to question the bond the fates themselves have decreed. The king needs heirs, Hannah spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. If she can't provide them, how do you know she can't? Aaron's question was deceptively soft. Have you examined her yourself? Are you a certified fertility healer? My mother is. Your mother, Aaron interrupted, turning his attention to the severe woman in healer's robes, who works for Moonveil Pack, who has a vested interest in seeing Tyler's rejection justified, who benefits politically if the king's mate is deemed unsuitable. He took a step forward. Tell me, Healer Winters, when did you examine Mia Thorne? The woman's composure cracked. I reviewed her medical history. That's not what I asked. Another step. When did you physically examine her? Take her blood. Test her hormone levels. When did you have any direct contact with my mate that would give you authority to make claims about her fertility? I didn't need to physically examine her. The patterns in her history. Patterns you extrapolated from fabricated documents. Aaron's smile was vicious. You built a diagnosis on lies, presented it to the High Council as fact, and expected no one to question it because you're gambling on their prejudice against low-ranking omegas. The chamber erupted in whispers. Several council members were now looking at the Moonveil contingent with suspicion rather than sympathy. This is exactly the kind of politics I've spent a decade trying to eliminate, Aaron continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. The idea that rank determines worth. That a low-ranking omega must be defective. That power and bloodline matter more than the fate's own design. He turned to face the council directly, pulling me against his side, his hand possessive on my waist. Mia Thorne is my fated mate. Not chosen. Not convenient. Fated. The bond between us is older than pack law, older than the council, older than the kingdom itself. When the fates tie two souls together, they don't make mistakes. They don't care about rank or politics or what prejudiced wolves think makes a suitable match. But heirs, Counselor Ashford tried weakly, will come if the fates will it, Aaron cut him off. And if they don't, then perhaps the fates have a different plan for my rule. Either way, it's not for this council to decide. It's not for Tyler Thorne to question. And it's certainly not for any of you to use as an excuse to undermine a bond you don't understand. He released me long enough to step forward, his power rolling off him in waves that made every wolf in the room want to submit. Let me be absolutely clear, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register. Anyone who questions my mate's worthiness, her fertility, or her right to stand beside me will answer to me personally. Anyone who spreads rumors, fabricates evidence, or attempts to undermine her position will find themselves without pack, without protection, and without mercy. His eyes found Tyler, who had gone pale as death. You rejected her because you thought she was weak. Because your mother convinced you that rank mattered more than connection. You destroyed something precious because you were too blind to see its value. Aaron's smile was cruel. And now you get to watch while I treasure what you threw away. While I elevate her above every omega in this kingdom. While I make absolutely certain that everyone knows she's mine, and that touching her means death. He turned back to the council. This hearing is over. Dismiss the petition. Sanction Moonveil Pack for bringing fabricated evidence before this body. And make it known throughout the kingdom that Mia Thorne is the king's fated mate, with all the power and protection that title demands. Counselor Blackthorne looked like she'd swallowed glass, but she nodded. The petition is dismissed. All evidence presented is deemed fraudulent. Moonveil Pack will be sanctioned for abuse of council processes. Aaron didn't wait for more. He simply took my hand and led me from the chamber, leaving Tyler and Hannah and the entire council to stare after us. Outside, in the corridor where no one could hear, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. That was necessary, Aaron finished. They needed to understand that you're untouchable. That questioning you means questioning me. That your rank before doesn't matter compared to who you are now. Who am I now? I asked softly. He pulled me close, his forehead resting against mine. Mine. Powerful. Protected. Everything they tried to convince you that you weren't. And for the first time since Tyler's rejection, I actually believed it. I found Aaron in his study 3 hours after the council hearing, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the forest beyond. He hadn't changed from his formal attire, though he'd loosened his collar and rolled up his sleeves. Even from the doorway, I could see the tension coiled in his shoulders, the barely restrained violence that hummed just beneath his skin. "You didn't knock," he said without turning around. "Neither did you this morning." I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. "I figured we were past that." His mouth curved slightly. "Are we?" I'd spent the past 3 hours in my wing, pacing and thinking and finally acknowledging what I'd been avoiding since the night of the gala. The truth that my wolf had known from the first touch, that my body had recognized before my mind would accept. "I've been running," I said quietly. "From you. From this. From what it means to be your mate." Aaron finally turned to face me, his amber eyes searching. "And now I'm done running." I moved deeper into the study, past the massive desk covered in maps and documents, until only a few feet separated us. "I watched you today in that council chamber. Watched you dismantle their lies, protect me, claim me in front of everyone who ever made me feel small. And I realized something." "What's that?" "That your ruthlessness isn't something to fear. It's the only thing that could have protected me from people like Tyler, like his mother, like everyone who wanted to keep me broken." I took another step closer. "You said you've been waiting for me to be strong enough to handle you. But I think I've been waiting for someone strong enough to handle me." Something heated flickered in his eyes. "Mia, I'm not finished." My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed steady. "For a year, I let Tyler convince me I was defective. I let his rejection define me. I let myself believe that being a low-ranking Omega meant I deserved scraps of affection and public humiliation. But you..." I pressed my palm against his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath my touch. "You looked at me and saw a queen." His hand covered mine, holding it against him. "Because that's what you are." I didn't believe it. Even after you claimed me at the gala, even after you showed me that obsession room, even after you destroyed the council's case against me, I still thought maybe you were wrong. That the fates made a mistake. That eventually you'd see what Tyler saw and realize I wasn't worth it. "Mia." My name was a growl, possessive and pained. But today, watching you fight for me, I understood. The fates don't make mistakes. They gave me a mate who's strong enough to stand between me and a world that wanted to destroy me. They gave me someone whose ruthlessness matches the depth of his protection. They gave me you. Aaron's control, that iron restraint he'd been maintaining since he'd brought me to his home, finally cracked. He pulled me against him with enough force to steal my breath, one hand fisting in my hair while the other locked around my waist. "Say it," he demanded, his voice rough. "Say you accept this. Accept me. Accept us." "I accept the bond." The words came easily now, natural as breathing. "I accept you as my mate. And I accept that I'm yours, just as completely as you're mine." His kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. It wasn't gentle or careful or tentative. It was claiming and consuming and absolutely inevitable, like he'd been holding back a storm and I'd finally given him permission to unleash it. His mouth moved against mine with desperate hunger, tongue sliding past my lips to taste and explore and possess. I kissed him back just as fiercely, my hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer even though there was no space left between us. The mate bond sang through my veins, golden and perfect, finally acknowledged by both of us. My wolf howled in triumph, recognizing her mate, celebrating the completion of something that had been building since the moment our souls were tied together. When Aaron finally pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His eyes had gone full amber, wolf staring at me through human features. "Mine," he growled. "Yours," I agreed. "But Aaron, I need you to understand something." His grip tightened fractionally. "What?" "I'm not going to be a decorative queen who smiles and stays silent while you handle everything." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not going to hide in the South Wing and let you fight my battles. If I'm going to be your mate, your equal, then I need to stand beside you, not behind you." For a moment I thought he might argue. Then his expression shifted into something that looked almost like pride. "I would never ask you to hide," he said. "I've spent 6 months watching you put yourself back together, piece by piece. Watching you become stronger, fiercer, more yourself. Why would I want to diminish that now? Because you're used to controlling things, protecting things. You've been managing my life from the shadows for months. I was keeping you safe until you were ready to keep yourself safe." His thumb traced my lower lip. "But you're right. I am ruthless. I am controlling. I will always be those things, Mia. It's who I am as a king and as an alpha. The question is whether you can accept that darkness in me." "I can accept it," I said. "Because I understand now that your darkness kept me in the light. Your ruthlessness gave me space to heal. Your control meant I didn't have to be strong every second of every day." I rose on my toes, bringing my mouth close to his. "But I'm strong now. Strong enough to stand with you. Strong enough to be the queen you deserve." His kiss this time was slower, deeper, a promise and a claiming all at once. When he lifted his head, his eyes were dark with want and something that looked almost like reverence. "Mark me," I whispered. "Complete the bond. Make me yours in every way that matters." Aaron's entire body went rigid. "Mia, if I mark you now, there's no going back. The bond becomes permanent. You'll be tied to me for life, bound to the fate of the kingdom, subject to every danger that comes with being the Alpha King's mate." "I know." I tilted my head, baring my throat in the ultimate gesture of trust and submission. "I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because the fates decreed it, but because I want it. Because you're mine just as much as I'm yours." The growl that rumbled through his chest was pure wolf, primal and possessive. His mouth found the sensitive junction between my neck and shoulder, lips tracing the spot where his mark would sit. I felt his canines extend, sharp and dangerous against my skin. "I love you," he said against my throat. "I've loved you since the moment I caught your scent. Since before I knew your name. Since the fates decided you were mine. I love you too," I breathed. "My ruthless king. My obsessive protector. My mate." His canines pierced my skin, sharp pain that bloomed into pure pleasure as the marking bond flooded through both of us. I felt him in my mind, his emotions, his absolute devotion, his feral need to protect and possess and cherish. And I felt myself in his mind too, my strength, my resilience, my choice to stand beside him as an equal. The bond snapped into place with the force of destiny recognizing itself, golden and unbreakable and absolutely perfect. When Aaron finally released my throat, licking away the blood, his mark glowed silver against my skin, the sign of a completed fated mate bond, visible to every wolf who looked at me. I was marked, claimed, and he was mine. "My queen," he murmured against my skin. "My king," I whispered back. No more running. No more fear. No more believing I was anything less than what the fates had intended me to be. I was Mia Thorne, fated mate to the Alpha King, and I was finally, completely, perfectly home. Thank you for joining the pack today. If this story pulled you in, make sure to subscribe and tap the moon bell so you never miss the next Alpha Destiny. And tell me in the comments, who should we follow next under the full moon?